Suppose we think of love and sex as reductive materialists. How are we likely to approach this subject here? Well, again, we are likely to say, well, sex is clearly a physical phenomenon. Right, our sexual apparatus, our physical organs, they undergo various processes. There's a whole hormonal story that can be told here. There's the whole biophysiology of sex that goes on in this case here. It's the means through which animals, including humans, reproduce themselves. It's a biochemical union, right, that occurs there. And what about love? Well, love is the psychological side of the equation. And certainly when we are sexually aroused, we find someone else who is very sexually attractive to us, we might have feelings like we are deeply in love with this person, that we want to spend the rest of our life with this person, and so on. But from the reductive materialist perspective, the love really is not an important phenomenon. It's a temporary phenomenon. It's a byproduct of just underlying hormonal, physiological phenomenon. If we really want to understand what's going on, the reason why the person thinks that he or she is in love is that they are in a certain sexually charged state, and as long as that sexually charged state exists, they're going to feel like they're in love, but the love isn't real phenomena. It's not what's actually driving the ship. It's not the case that you love the person and therefore find them sexually attractive. It's rather there's a sexual attraction, and as a byproduct, you feel the love state. And so, of course, if you ever find yourself no longer sexually attracted to the person, then the love goes away, and it's game over for that particular kind of relationship. Okay, so love is simply a hormonal state, or can be explained and reduced to an underlying physical state along those lines there. Now, then, as reductive materialists, what are we going to think in terms of the value of sex or the value of love? Well, sex is, from this perspective, going to be a good thing. It's a normal thing, right? It's a healthy thing. It's the way that human beings reproduce themselves, just as other animal species do. So if we're going to continue on the species, sex has to occur. And certainly by the time people are teenagers and they go through the puberty process, they're coming online sexually. Sexual behavior is what we should expect them to be engaging in. Any sort of not engaging in lots of sexual activity when you are sexually primed to go is abnormal behavior, and so as reductive materialists, we would not be engaged in that. So, from a reductive materialist perspective, and one value consequence of this is people who, in a top-down fashion, come to think that reductive materialism is true, might then come to the conclusion to say, well, therefore, the goal is to maximize my sexual activity as possible. And to minimize any sort of love connection here. Love might be a dangerous phenomenon. It leads people to make all kinds of commitments, get married, get saddled with children, right, and so forth. And so the best kind of life might be, if you think of this stereotypical swinging bachelor here, to have as much sex as possible with as many women as possible, but not ever to, in effect, let any woman get her hooks into him, so he gets tied down to the same old thing on a fairly regular basis. So we might say, from this perspective, the practice of many people of promiscuity, right, the notches on the bedpost approach to sexual morality is the ideal, and that has a natural fit with a reductive materialist approach. Because what you're doing, if you are promiscuous, is maximizing the physicality of sex, as much quantity there as possible, and minimizing at any sort of psychological, emotional, intellectual, or long-term commitment, kind of commitment that would be associated with it. All right, suppose now we turn to integrationism and say, all right, how would the integrationists be more likely then to approach the whole issue of sex, the whole issue of love? Well, the theory says in abstract form that the physical and psychological are equally important and codependent and interactive. If we then say that the sex is the physical side of the relationship, love is the psychological side of the relationship. It's certainly possible for people to have loving relationships without a sexual component. It's possible for them to have sexual relationships without a loving component. But from this perspective, the best kind of interaction is going to be an integrated kind of interaction where you're having sex with someone whom you love, and the person whom you are in love with, you also find that person sexually attractive. So here we have the standard romantic ideal, which is to find someone with whom you have a deep psychological bond. You like their character, you like their personality, you like their goals, their values, their belief system, and to have a long-term romantic relationship with that person that involves having an erotically charged and mutually satisfying sex life as well. So what is going on in a romantic context is that when there's a meeting, right, of two bodies in a bedroom, that is an enjoyable and mutually satisfying relationship for the two individuals sexually or physically rather, but also it is a psychological union. It's a meeting of two minds, two souls, and people are bonding with each other emotionally and in terms of their character as well as physically. So romantic love and sex then is the ideal in this circumstance. So in terms of these labels, which we expect we're all familiar with here, in this case what we have is no sex, right, all love, right, as the ideal, minimizing the physicality, maximizing the spirituality. In the case of promiscuity, we have the direct opposite. We have all sex, no love, maximizing the physicality, minimizing the psychological side of it. And in the case of romantic sex, what we have is sex and love integrated, as the name suggests.